Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News website. We've got another of our, I got a new company to introduce today, 9 Mile Metals. Why I like this company is they've hit several holes of high-grade copper and base metals, and looks like they're onto something very serious. For example, some of the holes that they hit, 10% copper, 1% zinc, 1.41% lead, 91 grams of silver, 0.84 grams per ton of gold over 15 meters. Another announcement, they had 175 grams of gold over and 7.35% zinc, 4.78% lead, 3% copper, 1.67 grams of gold, and again, over 10 meters. It's a very exciting project, and also they have a very tight share structure and a modest valuation. So I wanted to bring Charles Millette on today to talk about his company. Charles, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you guys are onto something in your early drilling that looks quite spectacular.
Yeah, this is, the whole thing about mining is when you come up with drill holes like this, it does get very, very exciting. So we're optimistic here going forward as we have a lot of things we have to do before we do a phase 2 program, which we will do, we expect in the next 60 days we'd start.
Okay. So far, what really got my attention was the drill core that you guys have shown, just full of massive sulphides. Yes. That gets my attention right away.
Well, for most people, depending on how much knowledge they have about mining, it's all about the value of a ton of rock. So when you look at 10% copper plus zinc, lead, silver, and gold, the values go way up. So you don't need 100 million tons. Certainly 1 million tons of this kind of rock would produce $1 billion of value. So for us, it's now the initial stages. We drilled these holes to get a really good idea. Once we had the assays, the first hole, we could say, we believe this is a lens. This is a portion of a deposit. It broke off and it traveled. We don't think it traveled very far from the deposit because of the richness of the grade. And the Bathurst camp is extremely well known. There's 46 deposits there. There are a number of very big mines that have been in production for 30 years. Nothing in the camp so far has been similar. There is nobody on surface like this that has come up with these grades of copper. You know, we've had the government geologist, a 30-year guy, PhD, who knows every single deposit. They're all very, very impressed. So the next steps for us are extremely important, because today we put out another news release. And in the news release, we had drilled 2 holes, number 1 and 2. The first hole was close to where we set up and drilled the high grade, but drilled it totally in a different direction, a couple hundred meters, so that we could do these downhole EM surveys, electromagnetic survey. And then 250 meters, another 200-meter hole, so that we'll get a 760 degree, 20 degree look, plus the surface should be about 600 meters across. So that'll give us an idea of this. Is it a lens, single? Is it multiple lenses? Is it pods? What shape is it? There's a lot to come from this downhole. And the one thing that we've relied on to get to where we are is a company called EarthX. I don't know if people are really aware, But the new technology really helps aim that drill. So EarthX uses AI. They take every bit of information that they can find on the property, all the government information, any other drill holes. They take our core, they take the chemistry of the core, they take it to the lab. So what they're looking for is a signature. When they take a drone, they only fly at 12 meters above the ground, and it's programmed to recognize the chemistry on the surface so that guys can go do geochem all day long. It's a long process, takes a lot of time. With this technology, you get a very, very good idea quickly about where the targets could be. So the combination of the downhole, the information we've given them, previous information, they fly the property, which they did. That's how we just decided where to drill and how to drill in this last program, was using collars that they recommended. So what they'll do for the phase 2, once we give them everything, is they will define actual drill hole collars, direction, depth. And they've been very, very successful in providing that information to companies and finding that they actually have turned out to be really good targets with results.
Well, that's pretty interesting to me, because I started many moons ago. I was involved in the technology space before I got involved in mining. So I've always been kind of a computer nerd, and, you know, being able to use the computer more effectively helps in a big way bring down your costs. In addition, in my career, I spent a lot of time in diamond exploration. And because those diamonds are so small, you have to throw a lot of science at it. And then compiling that data and making sense of it takes a lot of work. And now being able to use the computer modeling and expert systems, you're able to filter down that data to find what is most crucial.
Yes, and one of the questions we get is, you know, people ask about cross sections, where we drilled, all of this sort of thing. These days, assays take a long time. I mean, if we'd have just done regular assays, it probably would have been 2 months to 3 months before we could have had results. So we did this fast track, and also people ask us about this XRF technology. So the XRF helps also reduce costs, because we use that on the core, and if it doesn't run, we're not going to send it in for assay. But we're actually quite capable of using it. We split the core, turn it upside down. The laser picks the targets. So you go along, you have blanks, and it gives us then a really good idea. And we did release XRF results on the first 3 holes, but we won't do that anymore now that we've confirmed what we have with assays. And the assays were almost bang on with the XRF. So we know that we're quite accurate, but it does help us reduce costs and speeds things up.
Yeah,
But,
so you don't have to wait for your assays before you can drill more. You know, it's I first started seeing XRF 20 years ago, and you know, some of the problems that you can have with XRF is that you can be selective in where you zap that core. And the method you guys used, I've heard Peter talk about it, and it's a very scientific way you use that you put the split core in. You don't get to selectively zap it. Right. So and when I wasn't too worried about when I saw your core, I wasn't too worried about seeing XRF numbers go out. Not many people do it, but when you've got that much massive sulfides,
Yeah,
you know it's going to run.
hey, listen, you pick up those rocks. A ton of ordinary rock might be 2,000 pounds. Believe me, a ton of this stuff is a lot more than 2,000 pounds. It's very obvious.
Yeah, it's very dense stuff. I had a little experience in VMS as well, because I did some exploration when I was working for a geological consulting firm in Portugal. And the geologist had a chance to go and look at the Neves Corvo mine. And he actually brought back a piece of core, and we used to have it on our boardroom table. And that little big piece of rock, maybe like this big, was very heavy, very dense.
So our whole focus here now is we will get this downhole information, and they were there yesterday, hole 1. They went all the way down, I believe 180 meters at least, because you got to do it quickly. We don't want the hole to collapse and then influence how deep you can go, because if you only go 60 meters, you're not going to get a good picture. So they did 1 yesterday and then went to 2. And as long as there's no problem with those holes, which there isn't so far, they'll take a picture. That'll take a couple, 3 more days. All this then goes to EarthX. EarthX will produce a 3D model for us. So again, other people drill, takes months and months. They can show you cross sections. Listen, after doing this very quickly over 1 month, getting all these results, we'll put them all together for people. We'll produce a 3D model, which we will publish, showing all the information that we get from it, including the lens, what it looks like, the depth, the deposit. For us, of course, the ideal thing is to have that deposit show up reasonably close, because if we can drill into something like this lens, we're going to, I think, attract a lot of attention. You can't find results like this. Speaking
of that, what we do know about VMS deposits is they tend to come in clusters. These are volcanogenic massive sulphides. They generally come up in clusters. They're not an isolated event. Another thing is that if you are on the extension of a VMS deposit and you're getting 10-meter thick intersections of high grade, that tells you that there is a good potential for a lot bigger body down there, and that should be even richer grade, because you're looking at the extension of a volcanic event. You're not looking at the volcanic event itself. So to get such thick intersections of extreme high grade is very exciting. You find a pod where the earth opened up and allowed those fluids to pool up like a big swimming pool, and you're only looking at the splashes right now, and those splashes look exceptional. That's what caught my attention. Well, the core caught my attention. Seeing that much massive sulfide is quite impressive, and finding the rest of the body is and the potential to find more is quite exciting.
Yeah, and that's the excitement for us too, is we're looking forward. The one thing about New Brunswick, which is very favorable, the government people there in charge are very interested in what we're doing. Our permits for this deposit took only 30 days. Once we collared or decided where to drill, 30 days. And they've been, to the project, they've been to the core shack, they've looked at everything. And so we know once we get those collars, we can apply for permits, and then it's just lining up a drill. So,
I think why people have been hounding you, Bud, is for those plan maps, cross sections, and geologic maps, is because guys like me want to start waving our arms. We want to
Yeah, no,
start.
listen, I want you to wait. I want everybody to wave their arms. So we'll be about 2 weeks before we can put everything together and put it
Good,
on your desk.
good,
And that
perfect.
really, when you look at the time frame, within 6 weeks, 2 months, we'll have a complete picture of what this is.
Awesome. And there's been some historical drilling on this property. Is that correct?
Yes, there's been a number of holes drilled, 75 holes or something like that. But in those days, they relied on surface work, right? Doing a bit of sampling, looking at outcrops and things like that. Then they went in and generally drilled like 50-meter holes. And if they missed, which they did, they walked away and went somewhere else. In our case, we used EarthX, and we then extended this lens and looked at it, which had never been drilled. And that's what got us where we are now. So yes, we can do a map of all the drill holes in the area, but it was obviously they missed. And in mining, that's the opportunity.
Yeah, well, sometimes knowing where not to drill is just as important as knowing where to drill.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's worked real well. I mean, we were trading at 9 cents. And on the visuals on the core, we went to just visuals, no assays, no XRF. So that core was extremely impressive. And at PDAC, a lot of people had a look at it, a lot of big mining companies, a lot of people from Bathurst. So they are well aware. So I think as we put more information out to them, the opportunity, becomes greater that we'll have more success.
Well, speaking of opportunity, you guys only have a $10 million valuation. I don't think the market is really pricing in what you've already found, let alone the potential to find a magma chamber that is extremely high grade and has significant size to it.
Yeah, I'd say over about 55% of stock is insider locked up, 3 years, of course, but mostly nobody's going to sell any stock. But I think part of the thing is we did fund before on 2 different projects we worked on that came up blank. Luckily, the third time lucky here. And this market, realistically, I've been at this for 35 years as a stockbroker at Canaccord before going and doing this. I shouldn't say never say never, right? But it is as bad a market as I have seen. There's a lack of liquidity. There's not much happening. A lot of people are sitting on their hands. Even when people come up with good results, often they don't get a reward. So when you see liquidity, and I think in our case, we might have had a little better market cap, except for that. But the float, the actual free trading float possible is 22 million shares.
Oh, wow.
And of the 22 million, some of that would be myself. And when I funded it at Canaccord, when I was there, there's still a significant number of shares there that haven't been sold. So whatever the float is, I think soon we'll have turned it over. And the average cost will be around here this morning, around 23 to 25 cents.
Well, another thing that, I don't have a problem with tough markets. I've been in this business since 1993. I lived through the late 1990s. That was vicious.
Yes, it was.
Back then, nobody could raise any money. There was nothing happening. At least now companies can raise money, even in this tough market. There's activity. People are drilling right now. You guys are drilling. You guys are putting out results.
Yeah.
I'm seeing
and there
other
are guys raising money. There are people that, are managing to raise enough money to go to work. So there is money around. There's no doubt.
Well, and what what I'm optimistic about a turn happening is I'm seeing a lot of good companies out there trading at 52-week lows on their prices, but I'm also seeing them trade at 52-week lows on their volume.
Right.
And that suggests to me that maybe the selling pressure is reached its peak, if you will, and a better market is probably not too far away. Ultimately, I like to look at the big picture. And if you look at the big picture on copper, there's just, since I've been in the business in the 1990s, there's been under exploration. First, under exploration to feed the emerging economies of Asia. There wasn't enough to feed that. Now you've got this new phenomenon with the electric vehicle revolution, and also people looking at new ways to get energy, and all of that requires copper. And there's
copper and zinc they're both considered critical minerals, so we have them both.
And there's just not been enough exploration, and not just enough exploration, but a new discoveries. About 10 or 15 years ago, I remember reading a report, and it stated that we needed to find an escondida almost every year just to feed the demand for the emerging economies. Now we've got another phenomenon with electric vehicles. And so I think the argument for long-term copper is we're going to see over $5 a pound in the not too distant future, and that might be the bottom. Because we're just not finding enough of them. And I'm always looking for good copper stories. Most of them are very low grade. I like high grade, and you guys
I like high grade. I like it too.
It's high margin.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm really optimistic about your chances to find a cluster of VMS bodies. And that always opens the door for finding a magma chamber where you can pool up a lot of material.
Yeah, it won't take many tons with this kind of grade to make it extremely interesting.
Well, good on you guys. Keep the good work going. Charles, don't let those naysayers get to you.
No, listen, I mean, you have to put up with that always, but thank you very much for your time, Allan. And as soon as we get all the information together, we'll update you.
Perfect. And that's what I like to do with my interviews, Bud, is I like to find stories that I can keep telling as they go along. Because one thing I learned a long time ago from a mentor of mine was the more science you throw at a mine, the better it gets.
Yes.
You know, most of the time you look at projects, they've got these big geophysical anomalies or these big geochem anomalies. But when you start drilling, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Smaller, yeah.
Mines work the other way. It starts out like this and it goes like this as you do more work. And I like to be able to keep telling that story along the milestones that happen.
I'm hoping I can give you a lot of optimism to follow, okay?
Well, with my experience in VMS and volcanogenic events, I have a lot of confidence you're going to be able to do that, Charles.
Well, we reduce the odds. You know, if it's 1,000 to 1 on a drill hole, our odds have come way, way down. And that's the important thing. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Let me close it off and we'll have a chat at the other end.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
There you go, folks. This is a new company that I've been following since they started showing their drill core and their XRF results. They then followed that up with assays that showed those XRF were very accurate. They've got extreme high grade in 10-meter lenses about so far. Those likely come from a much bigger VMS body. And the potential for that to be extreme high grade and sizable. I don't think a 10-meter intersection at the extent is a small event that caused that to get there. Now it will be down to finding magma chambers, other lenses, and putting this all together into something. But as Charles said, when you're looking at those kind of grades, You don't need one of these Neves Corvo kind of size. You don't need 100 to 150 million to make a very profitable and big mine. There's lots of mines where they are, and I think they're on to something very special here. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to speak with your financial advisor and do your homework. I've done my homework. I like what I see in the drill core. I like what I see in the assays, the XRF, and these guys are just getting started. And they have a very modest valuation. So if you like high-grade copper and other metals, this is one for you to take a look at. On that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.